800 Australian horsemen sit their saddles on a ridge above Beersheba, and across 4 miles of open ground in front of them wait roughly 1,000 Ottoman riflemen and 9 machine guns. Not one Australian carries a cavalry sword. Their rifles are slung across their backs, not much use while you're trying to aim from a horse at full gallop, so bayonets come out, gripped in their fists like improvised swords. No supporting artillery is going forward with them, and there's no time left for another careful attack. When the order comes, they start forward, walk first, then a trot, heading straight toward a defensive line that's been fighting them all afternoon. And here's the part almost nobody expects. It isn't that they charged into that, it's how many of them rode out the other side. Rewind 5 months, because Beersheba wasn't Britain's first attempt to break this Ottoman line. They'd already tried twice at Gaza, and both times they'd been thrown back. Gaza sits at one end of a defensive line, stretching more than 40 kilometers across the desert, with this smaller town called Beersheba sitting at the other. And nobody really expects a major attack there for one pretty obvious reason. There's almost no water on the way. An army can't just march across that desert without it, and the Ottomans assume that pretty much settles the matter. General Chetwode doesn't think so. Working from old survey records and information from local Bedouin, he finds a hidden water source about 30 miles south of Beersheba at a place called Azluj, just enough to get an army across the desert alive. Suddenly, attacking Beersheba becomes possible. But there's a catch, because Beersheba itself has 17 wells, and those wells now become the clock hanging over the entire operation. Take the town today with most of that water supply still usable, and the offensive can keep moving. Wait too long, and the Ottomans can destroy the wells and pull back north, leaving thousands of men and horses sitting in the desert with nothing to drink. So the plan has 2 parts. British infantry divisions attack Beersheba's defenses from the southwest, while Allenby keeps Ottoman attention focused toward Gaza with a deliberate deception. Meanwhile, Chauvel's mounted divisions, Australians and New Zealanders, swing way out through the desert overnight and come at Beersheba from the east. At dawn on October 31st, more than 100 guns open up and the infantry starts moving. And by midday, they're through the western trenches. So far, so good. Except east of town, the Australians and New Zealanders run straight into a fortified hill called Tel Saba, and this thing refuses to fall. Hour after hour disappears fighting over one hilltop, and every hour they lose is another hour closer to sunset, which means another hour closer to losing those wells. Tel Saba finally falls in the middle of the afternoon, but Beersheba itself still hasn't. It's now around 4 o'clock. The sun is dropping, Beersheba is still Ottoman, and Chauvel is running out of options. He has one uncommitted brigade left, the Australian 4th Light Horse Brigade under Brigadier General William Grant, and whatever happens next needs to happen fast. Now here's what matters about the Light Horse. These guys aren't cavalry, they're mounted infantry. Their normal method here in the desert and earlier at Gallipoli is pretty straightforward. Ride toward the enemy, get off the horses, and then fight with rifles on foot. That's what they're trained to do, and it's the kind of attack the men waiting across those Ottoman trenches expect to see. And it's exactly what the Australians are about to stop doing. Grant commits the 4th and 12th Light Horse Regiments, roughly 800 riders, and instead of approaching the Ottoman position, getting off the horses and fighting their way forward on foot, they're going straight in mounted. So just look at what they're riding toward. Close to 1,000 Ottoman riflemen, 9 machine guns, several kilometers of completely exposed ground, and not one cavalry sword among the Australians. These guys were never equipped for some glorious old-fashioned saber charge, so the bayonets come out instead, clenched in their fists like makeshift blades. Grant gives the order, the lines start moving at a trot, and then the pace starts building. Trot becomes canter, canter becomes a flat-out gallop. 800 horses start kicking up this enormous wall of dust behind them, swallowing whole sections of the formation. And now the Ottoman defenders are trying to work out exactly how many riders are coming through that mess, and where the main weight of the charge actually is. Ottoman artillery opens up first, then rifles, then the machine guns. Sand starts exploding around the charging lines. Riders are hit, horses go down, men disappear into the dust behind them. And still the light horse keep coming. They don't stop to reorganize, they don't slow down to dismount, they just keep closing that distance, faster and faster. From inside those trenches, this must have looked like suicide. You've got hundreds of horses coming straight at you, getting bigger by the second, while every weapon you can bring onto them is firing. And they still aren't getting off those horses. The gap keeps shrinking, they're still mounted, they're still accelerating. And this is where Beersheba gets really interesting. Mounted infantry has a routine. The riders approach, they slow down, they stop, they get off the horses. And then the real attack develops on foot. That pause matters, because while the attackers are dismounting and organizing, the men defending those trenches get time to settle down, aim properly, and start breaking up the attack before it reaches them. Except this time, that pause never comes. The light horse don't slow down to dismount, and they don't stop at all. The defenders, who have spent the afternoon expecting the kind of attack mounted infantry normally makes, are suddenly dealing with hundreds of Australians who are still on horseback, and closing the distance way faster than expected. Ottoman riflemen are scrambling to adjust their aim for a fight that's suddenly much closer than the one they'd prepared for, while British artillery continues covering the advance. You need some serious courage to even attempt something like this. But courage isn't why most of them survived. The Ottomans had prepared for a different kind of attack, and by the time they realize these Australians aren't getting off their horses, they're running out of time to stop them. The same speed that makes the charge look completely insane is now compressing the defenders' firing window with every second, until suddenly those hundreds of mounted targets aren't way out across the desert anymore. They're reaching the trenches. Most of the light horse reach those trenches. Still in the saddle, and near the front is Trooper Thomas O'Leary, who doesn't even stop at the first one. His horse clears a roughly 4-foot wide defensive trench at full gallop. O'Leary keeps going straight into Beersheba. And somehow this gets even crazier, because once he's inside the town, he captures a machine gun and 30 Ottoman soldiers by himself, an action that later earns him the military medal. Behind him, other men of the 4th Light Horse finally do what mounted infantry normally does. They get off their horses and start fighting on foot with rifle and bayonet until the trench line gives up. Meanwhile, the 12th Light Horse finds a gap between two defensive positions and rides straight through it, barely touched, heading directly into Beersheba itself. And taking the trenches doesn't end this thing. Inside Beersheba, Captain Jack Davis spots an Ottoman column trying to get out of town with its artillery still hitched up and ready to move. So Davis swings his squadron around toward the northern edge of Beersheba and blocks the escape route. Now you've got this bizarre standoff, a relatively small group of Australian horsemen sitting in the way of an Ottoman column that still has hundreds of men and its guns. But the column doesn't break through. 38 Ottoman officers and roughly 700 men surrender there, along with 9 guns and 3 machine guns. The artillery that was supposed to disappear north with the retreat is captured before it can even get away. By evening, Beersheba belongs to the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, and most of those 17 wells are still standing, with the water the entire operation desperately needed. They just pulled off something that should have gotten most of them killed, and it hadn't. If you're not subscribed yet, this is exactly the kind of story we dig into every week. Battles that shouldn't have gone the way they did. Now, here's what it actually cost them. 800 men rode toward roughly 1,000 rifles and 9 machine guns. And by every normal expectation, that sounds like a massacre. Instead, 31 Australians are killed and 36 wounded. Those are still 31 men who aren't going home. And one of them is a name Australians in 1917 would have recognised immediately. Tibby Cotter, a Test cricketer famous across Australia as one of the fastest bowlers of his generation. His brother had been killed on the Western Front less than a month earlier, and now Cotter is killed riding with the 12th Light Horse at Beersheba. 2 brothers, gone less than a month apart. And here's the weird part. The same thing that made this charge look completely insane is probably one of the reasons so many Australians survived it. They stayed on the horses, instead of slowly fighting their way across several kilometers of exposed ground on foot. The light horse crossed that killing ground in minutes, which meant the Ottoman defenders simply got less time to shoot at them. Every second the Australians stayed mounted was another chunk of that firing window disappearing, until suddenly the targets those machine guns were trying to stop weren't hundreds of meters away anymore. They were at the trenches. And despite how Beersheba is usually remembered, these guys weren't even cavalry. They were mounted infantry, riflemen who happened to be sitting on horses. No cavalry swords, no glorious saber charge. Their rifles came with them and bayonets were clenched in their fists because, at a full gallop, that was the improvised weapon they had. 800 Australians rode toward roughly 1,000 rifles and 9 machine guns. And on this particular afternoon, getting off the horses may have been the more dangerous option. I'm ZoMbo. If you made it this far, you're already part of the quest. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.